My name is Christy Busby, and you are about to listen to the next episode of my podcast called F.A.T.E, From Atheism to Enlightenment. So come on in, join me. We're going to talk about it all, from atheism to enlightenment. Alrighty, guys, here we go. Get ready, and welcome to your F.A.T.E. Welcome, everyone, to the next episode of F.A.T.E. On today's show, I am bringing you Ocean Malandra. He is an environmental journalist, a travel writer, and he has co-authored a book along with Dr. Natalie Dyer, a Harvard researcher. It is called Infinite Perception: The Role of Psychedelics in Global Transformation. I'm very excited to have him on and talk about this topic. Ocean, I love your name. Welcome to your F.A.T.E, Ocean. How you doing today?
Excellent. Thank you so much, Christy. I'm excited to be on your show. Thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Thank you for coming aboard and spending your time with me. I really appreciate it. I read your book and it was super informative. You talked to everyone from tribal leaders to scientists to anthropologists to authors to activists. There really isn't anybody untouched in your book as far as the sources that you went through to educate people on psychedelics, what they do, how they can truly transform people's lives in dramatic ways. And it is such an important topic that I'm super excited to talk about. I like to always start at the beginning, though. How did you come about writing this book? What is your own personal journey with any kind of psychedelics? I don't know about you, but I don't love the term psychedelics. I kind of use the term plant medicine. And that's what I look at it as. I look at it as medicine. It's sacred. It's medicine. And we'll get into that later. But why don't you go ahead and tell me your own journey with using any types of these plants?
Okay, absolutely. Thank you, Christy. Yeah, this book was born as it's a labor of love, and I am a co-editor. My co-editor, as you mentioned, Natalie, she is a Harvard-trained neuroscientist. So and she's been doing research on psychedelics. And the reason we went with the word psychedelics instead of plant substances is although it's pretty limited, some of the contributors do talk about some of the more chemical psychedelics in that context. But in my personal work, Christy, I've mostly worked with plant medicine. I'm an environmental journalist. I've been lucky enough to spend a lot of time in places like the Amazon rainforest. And in a way it was by choice. There's a personal healing journey involved. And then that turned into kind of a career in a funny way. And I ended up writing about these plant medicines. And so, and I've written about them for many different outlets, including mainstream ones, environmental news sites like Mongo Bay or Vice. But for a while, I was one of the kind of core writers on a website called Reset Me, which was started by Amber Lyon. Some people who are into this world will know it's no longer there, but she was a CNN anchorwoman who experienced PTSD from covering war and just like really hardcore stuff around the world. And she went to the Amazon, tried ayahuasca, and found relief, and returned, and then eventually dropped out of CNN and started her own website. And it was one of the kind of pioneers of plant medicine. And I was really lucky to get involved with that. And it was a combination of news and personal stories. And we had a lot of freedom in the way we covered things. And so by the time I got invited to write this book, I had kind of a lot of connections in that world, Christy. So a lot of my chapters, some of my chapters are interviews, like some of the big names like Dennis McKenna is an interview, or Rick Doblin from MAPS. But those were relationships I had already kind of established. And then some of the other chapters, like you mentioned, are indigenous shamans or curanderos that I knew from being in the Amazon. And so I just brought everybody together from my side, and Natalie brought people from kind of the academic world, the research world.
Yeah.
And that's how this book came together.
I mean, it is very well done. And I feel like it is such a needed book to be birthed at this time because, as you do mention at the beginning of the book, we are living in precarious times. We are. Why don't you go ahead and let's talk about a little bit about what are some of the profound um, experiences that people can have with using some of these plant medicines like ego death and so on. Like, how can this truly transform people's lives? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of research backing this up now, and I think that is one of the main drivers behind this kind of mainstreaming that we're seeing of psychedelics now, because they are breaking through where honestly a lot of other treatments just
Yeah.
in terms of things like addiction, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, right? People are having breakthrough experiences. And that term you use, ego death. Um, yeah, I think that it does. One of the reasons why people get breakthroughs is it breaks you out of your individual shell, right? And you experience something. In my introduction, I write about the mystical
Yes.
state, which is what does that even mean? But the reason why I use that term is because I link to it in that intro. There's about a dozen studies now that show that the amount of therapeutic effect that people get is related to how much of a mystical state, a mystical experience they have. And I guess there's some kind of questionnaire they use in some of these studies, like, did you feel like this? And one of them, did you feel like your ego fell away? Whatever. Yeah, there's a definite correlation to having a mystical experience and experiencing some kind of transformative therapeutic effect from these plant medicines.
It
Absolutely.
it is incredible. I've had my own journeys. I've had 3 or 4 Aya journeys. I I have used them for health reasons, and I've been on my own health journey the last decade and trying to heal my body, and I find that it's kind of how I got into this podcast and my spiritual path is in a way through plant medicine because it does give you a mystical experience and allows you to understand that we are more than we think we are and that there is more going on within our reality than we are taught. And it opens up your mind in a way that you could never otherwise be able to do. It taps into other energies. It you can there's so many different types of experiences you can have, and it all depends on where you're at in your life, in your path, what your needs are, what your intention is when you go into a setting. Why don't we talk a little bit about the importance? Because when people use the word psychedelics, I think that they harken back to people in the 60s running around with their shirts off and singing and all of that, which is great. That's one aspect of it, but I really think that to gain true healing and to gain really an opening of your heart, a opening of your mind, you need to be very specific with setting an intention and who's facilitating. And why don't you talk a little bit about the importance of going into any kind of what I would call a ceremony with these medicines and how sacred it is, and maybe from the shamanistic point of view, why don't you go ahead and discuss that a little bit?
Definitely. Christy, that's a very important subject. And it's one in which there's a huge conversation going on right now as these traditional medicines get implemented into the modern medical world, right? How exactly is that going to happen? And can it even be replicated in the same way? Because from my experience, what you're talking about is there's a lot of truth to the fact that these medicines have been used within a specific ceremonial context. And in some ways, that context is just as important as the medicine because there's something that is being transmitted for lack of a better term, or something that is being preserved and passed down or explained.
I would also say it is the energy that the facilitator is bringing to that space. It really is. It is about whoever is preparing that brew, whoever is touching that medicine, that energy. And when I'm getting a little woo woo here, there's no doubt. But there's no doubt there is a presence and energy and intention, even from the very mixing of this brew for people to sit and drink. That matters. That matters. It matters.
Absolutely.
I would say it's the energy, the vibration, and the intention that is being presented with that medicine that is going to impact your journey.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Christy. Every small
Yeah.
part of it. And that's why there's songs
Yes.
that are involved, there's music, there's artwork, there's all kinds of things that are involved. And so how do we really replicate that? Do we even understand it enough to replicate these things? Because as you said, they're not just physical things. There's something behind. Those are representations of an energetic world. It's a complex and deep question that I don't know if I have all the answers to be honest,
It
but
it is a very complex question because unless how do I say this? Unless you have like for me, I had to go into this I took my first Aya journey when I was very ill. So I was already in a situation where I wasn't going in to have a psychedelic trip. I was going in a very debilitated, um, looking for healing moment in my life. So it was very ceremonial to me. It was very sacred to me. But unless you're in that headspace, it's 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 not an easy thing to just step into if you don't have any prior knowledge of what an Aya ceremony is, what it entails, what to expect. And I do worry about the commercialization of these types of plants because there is a danger of people misusing them, abusing them. Not only the medicine itself, but the areas in which to grow these medicines, the sacred tribals that have been working with these plants for thousands of years that understand their power, their spirituality, it's a deeply spiritual thing that I think most people are not aware of, you know? So I think there would need to be a lot of education around it, I think, if you're going to go down this path. If whether you have PTSD, whether you have, any kind of depression, it can help and lift you out of so many things, but it is a journey, it really is, and it will change your life fundamentally, for real. Um all right. So the one thing I would like to say for anybody out there, if you are looking for any kind of spiritual experience or a journey, you really do have to find somebody that is trusted and that you're going to be getting the right oversight when you step into this because nothing's perfect. People can go out and have just negative experiences. If you don't eat the right diet, eat clean, you're not supposed to have any kind of, you're not supposed to watch the news or even, you're supposed to kind of do a cleanse, a detox before you even sit with Mother Aya in order for her to really work with you. And it could really impact your experience if you've just gone out and had a Burger King with a milkshake and smoked 8 cigarettes and drank the night before. You're probably not going to have a great experience with these plants. It's nothing to play with, I would say. Wouldn't you think? You have to take it seriously.
absolutely.
Um,
I'm I'm glad you said
It
that.
it's
Yeah.
it is. I mean, you just can't go and say, "Oh, I'm gonna do a ceremony tonight," without actually preparing for it. You have to mentally, physically prepare to sit in these ceremonies and have an experience if you're truly serious about seeking healing, I would think. Um, how
Absolutely.
how 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 many journey how what have you mainly been in your jungle times? Were you mainly sitting with Aya, or what else did you Mainly?
Mainly with Aya. There's a cactus that grows in the Andes as well that's not as well known as peyote, but it's related, and it's called San
Yeah.
Pedro. It's a tall columnar columnar cactus, and it contains mescaline like peyote. And I've journeyed with San Pedro many times, and I'm also a fan of the here in California. I don't know about LA, but here in San Francisco, there are mushroom churches popping up
Yes.
everywhere, and they operate much like marijuana dispensaries, really. And that's a fascinating thing because mushrooms mm, are somewhere in between. I mean, they're serious
Mhm.
too, and they have a whole sacred history. There's a whole area of Mexico, mostly in the Oaxacan highlands, where mushrooms, there's a highly developed mushroom shamanism around their healing and sacramental use. But they don't quite hit you as hard as, say, ayahuasca. You know what I
Yes.
mean? So there's a little more room, and I wouldn't say to play. I like what you said. There's still nothing to with, but they're a little softer in the sense that they're probably a little bit more conducive to maybe doing them on a camping trip around a fire with some friends and some music. I always recommend doing these sacred things with a good intention, right?
It's exactly right. It's exactly, I myself have had my familiarities with the a little psilocybin, going out into the woods, camping,
Hmm.
sitting under the night, and I always do this under before I take it. I say a little with all good intentions, just to set an intention that you want to be able to invite that into your body and have a good experience with good intentions. But it is something that you could use more recreational, I would say. You
It's
know?
true, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and but like you said, the set and setting are still important. Bad trips
Oh,
do
yeah.
happen on mushrooms,
I
they do.
I yeah, they sure
So
do.
respect, I think respect is
Yeah.
always key, and intention, and I mean, I think these are medicines is what it comes down to. So as long as you treat them in that way, like it's for healing. And I want to touch on something you talked about a couple of minutes ago about the
Mm,
commercialization. That's another huge
yes.
topic. When people ask me about it, they say, "Oh, I get all kinds of questions. Don't people have the right to become entrepreneurs and this and that?" Of course, right? But just like any other spiritual tradition or sacred healing tradition, whether we're talking about Buddhism or and even Christianity, we don't really want our pastor to be in it for the
That's
money,
right.
right? And we don't really want, when we go to a 10-day meditation retreat, we don't want them to be in it purely for the money. We want them to really be in it because they know what they're doing and they've learned something that they're going to pass to us. And so it's the same thing with this. To just address that, when you're looking for a place to go, when you're looking for a facilitator, you do, because there are reports, I'm sure you've seen them, and there's actually a lot of them, but that's just because the whole thing is growing. But there's people are having strange
Yes.
experiences, that are getting. There's a lot of people who are maybe not in this, and I'm not saying that they're in it for bad reasons, but they maybe fully haven't developed themselves to a point where they maybe should be putting those shoes on and serving these medicine. I'm just going to say
I
that, and they're doing it because they know they can make a lot of money.
I just don't know anything out there that has been able to escape corruption once you put a profit to it. We are who we are, and we are very greedy, selfish little beings that we are. And when we are all wanting this money seems to be such a prominent device in this world. And I understand money is a tool and it can be used for good, it can be used for bad, but I feel like it just has there's nothing wrong with money. There's just something wrong broken inside of us, I think, in a way that allows for money to just corrupt who we are. I think money changes us in not everybody, I'm not you can't generalize everybody on the planet, but more often than not, money seems to corrupt your ability to empathize, sympathize, and identify with your fellow man. We love to be able to feel like we're superior to other people, and money is a way that we're able to do that. So once you
Hmm.
inject profit
Absolutely.
into something, inevitably it seems like it's going to tint or change or, you know, make it about corruption and the money rather than healing people, rather than enlightening people. I personally think very much the same way you do that psychedelics, plant medicines, they could truly transform the world because it does open your mind to a way of being, to other energies, to your spirituality, and it makes it not, maybe, I don't know if this is the right way to say it. You start understanding that you're a part of something bigger and that it's not all about you. Does that make sense? Like, you know,
Absolutely. I think that's what it's all
it,
about.
it is. I also think though, don't you think there's a lot of fear around these medicines, around psychedelics? There's a lot of fear-based nonsense around these plants in general, I would think. And I think that came from the government a little bit, maybe? I don't know. What do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Um, you know, I think that's really deep. We have a history in Western civilization that includes burning of
Yeah.
witches, right? And who were these witches? I saw a meme the other day, and it said something like, um, the fact that we've been taught to be more afraid of witches than the people that burned them
Yes.
may be a real problem. And that can
Yes.
make me stop and go,
So true. So true.
because what was going on there when we were burning witches? We were stamping out we were actually stamping out knowledge that was very guarded by women, first of all, right? There was a form of female empowerment, but it was also a connection with nature that we were breaking.
Yes.
And then we labeled it, this fear you're talking about, we labeled that as something to be afraid of.
Yes.
Witches in their little cottages in the woods, all casting bad spell. And that's kind of, you know, it's become a thing.
I mean,
And really, these were medicine women who knew how to work with plants and heal
yes.
you. Really, they weren't, you know what I mean?
Yeah. You know, I know the pharmaceutical industry has just taken over everything, but to be honest, through my own healing journey, I have found going back to plants and seeing an herbalist and working with plant medicine has healed me more so than any other pharmaceutical drug or Western medicine at all. I have kind of leaned completely to the other side. And going back to the witches, even as a child, with all of the little fairy tales that were all grown up, were all of these horrible, ugly witches in the forest doing brews from, programmed since we were children to think that way about people that were connected to nature, that had a knowledge of what these plants were and how powerful they were and how they could heal. And they just stomped that right out of, burned us at the stake and everything else because, I don't know, religion? I don't know. I don't know.
I think
Yeah.
it was a power thing for sure. And I mean, if you look at European history, you had this witch burning period that came right before the colonization of other parts of the world, where, of course, the colonizers encountered these same traditions everywhere
Yeah.
else. And they had already established that these were evil, and then
Yeah.
colonize the world, stamp out these practices. Religion was definitely used as a reason to do
Yeah.
so. I think you're
Yeah.
right. These are witchcraft. This is
This is,
devil
you're going to go to
worship.
hell. This is
Um,
Satan
and,
worshiping,
and,
all of that fear, 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 fear. We're fearful little things.
and, yeah,
We
we
really
are.
are.
And, the Spanish Inquisition
Yeah.
was about that. I spend a lot of my time in Latin America, and in the last 10 years, a lot in Colombia. In Cartagena, Colombia, there is a palace of the Inquisition. And Christy, it's deep. They torch. I mean, who? I'm more scared of the people who came up with all these devices
Yes.
for torturing confession. You want to see some like black magic? You want to see a horror movie?
Yeah.
There's a Palace of the Inquisition in Mexico City. There's one in Peru and Lima, and there's one in Cartagena, Colombia. Visit one of these places. They were inventing ways to torture people into admitting that they were devil worshiping witches, um, to crush any of these traditions. And the stuff they come up with, like one of them, you had to sit in a chair and there were spikes that would go into your neck, and you would sit there for days. Every time you fell asleep, you would impale yourself.
Oh my
And like,
God.
who invented this? Who comes up, you know?
I mean, this is a little off topic, but like when you look back throughout our history and even now in present day, we are very violent and barbaric creatures. We are. We're the only ones
Right.
out there destroying our resources, the planet, killing off every species, killing each other. Everything we touch, it seems we destroy each other. It's very, we definitely need psychedelics in this world if we are going to turn around the divisiveness, the hate, the fear, the lack of empathy and sympathy that we see out there towards one another. We are extremely tribal and we're not getting any smarter, folks. It seems like we're going in the other direction. We really are. As technology rises, I feel like it's not helping us out in the critical thinking skills department whatsoever, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and talk about the healing properties of these plants and what they truly can do. You say in the book that scientists, all types of people in the book that have had knowledge and research and background in these medicines talk about people getting healed from PTSD, from bipolarism, from depression, from every kind of mental disorder that you can possibly think of in a faster, better, healthier way than therapy, than pharmaceutical drugs. Some of these transformations can happen after one ayahuasca journey, after one peyote journey. They will see a significant shift in their ability to function just from using these psychedelics. Can you talk a little bit about what types of things really people um, can heal from?
Sure. Although I can't give any medical
Sure.
advice, right?
Absolutely.
um, but I've seen it's very much like you said earlier. I've seen people, they immediately take you out of whatever limited perception you're in, right? So a lot of times addiction or depression, even PTSD, there's like this kind of circular thought. You're just stuck on this thing that and it bothers you. And so, your only way out is a drug or alcohol. Psychedelics immediately take you out of whatever you're stuck in and they give you a wider picture. I have a friend who describes them as like a helicopter that comes in and picks you up and takes you to the top of the mountaintop. And with a really strong, powerful psychedelic experience, you can really like see how everything is interconnected.
Yes. Yes.
Now, they don't necessarily leave you at the top of the mountain. They bring you right back down. And then you still have to do a lot of the work yourself to get back up there. But the value is you've seen it though. Now you've seen
Yes.
it and now you believe in
Yes.
it and now you know it exists. So from what I've seen in the traditional context, a lot of times people do train with these plant medicines for years. And it's a lot like, let's say, Buddhist training, where you're developing a certain mindset. And then you use the plant medicine to see like how far you've come. And then maybe the shaman or the facilitator is someone who's been working with this stuff for their whole life. And they've developed a kind of faith and they're able to sing and dance while you're still writhing there in all your
Yeah.
problems. And they're kind of showing you like, if you clear that all out, you can be here singing and dancing too, and joyously enjoying life.
Yes. Yes.
And that joyful state is also, opposite of depression or PTSD or all of these things. And so I think psychedelics, and like we talked about earlier, with a really good guide, someone who's really worked their own way through,
Mm-hmm.
right, are powerful ways to cut through a lot of these things that people
Yes.
are dealing with right now. And so they have incredible potential because we are in a serious I saw statistics the other day. Depression is now the leading cause of disability in the world. And by 2030, which is just, 5.5 years away, 5 years away, it's going to be the leading cause of morbidity, meaning suicide will be the number one cause of death. WHO, World Health Organization, projects this. I don't know if you saw this, Christy. 2 weeks ago, Surgeon General of the United States put out an emergency declaration that parents are so stressed that they can't, nearly half of American parents are so stressed that they can't function right now, meaning they can't properly raise their children. Okay. And he cited three reasons. I think it was
Yep.
monetary. I mean, people are worried
Yep.
about money, just plain stress. And the other one was interesting, loneliness. People feel isolated and
Yeah.
alone. Now, are plant medicines going to solve your loneliness? Not necessarily, although the ceremony is actually very, if you do it with a good group of people, you can bond for the rest of
Yep.
your life. But what I think, and to get to the deeper answer to your question, I think that psychedelics will help us reimagine and reinvent some of the core aspects of our civilization that keep us locked in these structures that we now see clearly are damaging us and are damaging the world. And so they're kind of lose-lose situation. And psychedelics give us the ability to kind of see other possibilities and move towards them on both the personal level and on the social level. And as you look, you read some of the book, that's what it gets
Yeah.
into. It moves through these different things. It's like we are all in this
Right.
together, and our mental health and it interdependent with our societal health and with our environmental health. I mean, this idea that that comes hand in hand with some of Western thought that somehow we can be happy separately from other people, or even separately from the world alone. This is what kind of drives everybody wanting to be a
Yeah.
billionaire. Look at Elon Musk, right? Like you can, he's got all the money in the world. He can go live on the moon. But there's another thing I saw in the news. He started talking about the fact that he struggles with depression. I don't know if you
I
saw
didn't.
this. And he's looking to psychedelic. Right. And so it's like, if anybody knows Elon Musk, I want to say, Elon, I've got some mushrooms. We can go for a walk at Golden Gate Park sometime, open invitation. I don't even want any money. But like somebody like that has power to change things. And
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up because in your book, Dennis McKenna talks about the fastest way to get real change to happen on the earth, which, in my opinion, one of the reasons why we're so depressed, we're so disconnected, we are so lost is because we are not meant to live the way we're living. We are not meant. The vast, vast, vast majority of humans out there are living terrible lives. We are. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that we have allowed in the last 100 years a very small contingency of corporations and people to make an egregious amount of money. And now they sit atop of us like gods looking down, never wanting to be one of us, don't interact with us, don't see themselves in us at all. And they make all the choices. We have just gotten ourselves into a big problem with the level of money that we have allowed to accumulate at the top of the food chain in our world. In our world, a very small group pretty much manages everything. You could say America's a democracy. I would call America an oligarchy. I know we call them billionaires Elon Musk is a billionaire. That's what we call him in America. In Russia, we would call him an oligarch. Why don't we call him an oligarch here? Oh, because it's America and we don't have oligarchs. We're in a democracy. Uh-huh. Okay. So what Dennis says is to promote change as quickly as possible. Somebody like Elon Musk taking psychedelics, maybe it would. Wouldn't it be amazing, Elon, if you're listening? If he were to go on an ayahuasca journey, understand that being a billionaire is not where it's at. Having all the money in the world is not where it's at. You're not going to be able to take it with you. You're going to die like all the rest of us on the planet. And filling yourself up with this ego-driven, materialistic, overconsumption way of life is not what is filling your soul, nor is it ever going to. It's not. And maybe if more billionaires and people that were excessively, egregiously powerful were able to understand that we are much more than when we think we are, and that it's not about greed, money, power, control, superiority, dominating other people, which is basically what's happening. It's not about that. That's not what we're here for. I know that's a lot. That was a lot and that was deep. But what do you what do you think about that?
Christy,
That was a lot.
I reported that all here. But I absolutely agree with you. Yeah, we are definitely, not just in America, but globally, inequality is it's at a level that we haven't seen since the colonial
Yes.
era, actually. Um, and you're absolutely right. The corporations run everything, and I'm not gonna. I know there's an election year, but if you can look at both parties, and from some of these big corporations, they give equal amounts of money to
That's
both
ex
parties. They just place their bets on either side. I'm not saying both parties are the same. However, I am saying that in certain areas, these corporations are not worried about who wins because they've got their bets covered, and they do really run the country. And this has been proven. What you said about United States being an oligarchy, there was a study done. You can look it up. It was covered by BBC News and the New York Times. There was a big study done, and it showed that actually the average voter has very little influence in American politics, and these big corporations have a huge amount of influence. And they said study proves United States is not a democracy; it's an oligarchy. So I absolutely agree with you.
Hey.
This is so true. Now, when we get into like this, what Dennis McKenna said, I think he's right. I think that I think that there's a spiritual misunderstanding. Maybe spiritual is not even the right word, but his brother, Dennis McKenna, said once something like, let me see if I can remember this right. Um, that was Steinbeck, but something about the billionaires. Um, well, Steinbeck said something like, in America, the poor don't see themselves as oppressed. They see themselves as temporarily embarrassed future billionaires. Because part of the problem is, this is what McKenna said. He said, if a monkey was to hoard all the bananas in a zoo, all the other monkeys would be like, what's
Yeah.
up, dude? But in America, we put them on the cover of Forbes. So there's a problem. It's not just the billionaires. There's a problem that we actually kind of reinforce this with looking up to people who do this,
We
right?
do.
There's like a cultural thing about
Well,
this.
we're taught a big lie that one, if you work really hard, you could be a millionaire too. That might have been
Right.
the story in the 50s and 60s when we had this resurgence of, quite frankly, a lot of programs in America that lifted everybody up, like the GI Bill and the when we built all the highways and everybody went to work and manufacturing, and you could have one job and you could support a wife and you could put your kids in a free college or damn near free college in this country. There was just a
Hmm.
different time. Meritocracy does not exist in America unless you were born in the right zip code with the right family and the right support. Your chances of eking out a living, a sustainable, normal, let's have one vacation a year, maybe in two cars in a nice area of the country with good schools, that is like a pipe dream for most people now. It's unattainable. And it's not for a lack of hard work. We're working three jobs and barely
Yeah.
paying anything off because there's no bottom to the greed that's happening at the top. I personally think all this inflation, a lot of it's happening globally, number one. It's not just happening in America, it's happening in England, it's happening everywhere. And it is a lot of price gouging, greed, and inflation for no reason. There's never been more money going into Wall Street. Nobody's losing money in corporations, and yet we are all languishing, and it is causing a lot of people to go to crime, to be depressed, to shoot things up, to it's psychologically damaging, especially when people are scrolling on their phone, seeing all these people living these incredibly fantastical lives that they will never be a part of. Like, it's just we are filled with propaganda that being rich is where it's at and having the material wealth is where it's at, and that's going to give you, don't get me wrong, it does give you some freedom. It does give you comfort, but it's definitely not going to make you any happier. It's like people think that if they move to the Bahamas, they're going to be happy. No, that's just geography. It's not going to make you any happier. You're still going to be stuck with yourself every morning trying to figure out what your soul purpose is, what your passion is. I think we all are here for a reason and we all have a soul purpose. And the way in which we live our lives now does not allow us to seek anything of fulfillment. We are stuck in slave jobs. And then maybe we'll get 10 years on the back end when we're decrepit and been broken from work that we will be able to maybe not eat out of a cat food can. And, like, that's what it's coming down to. All the while people live egregiously wealthy lives that I can't figure out why that is so coveted. At some point, you can buy everything. Okay, then what? Now what? And
No, absolutely, Christy. Before I became a journalist or whatever, I worked in, I worked in the service
yeah,
industry, and for a while there, I worked in Upper East Side, New York City. We're all rich people
yes,
all the time, and you know, it probably feels good to have all that money, but they sure are not like in some. No, they are in some miserable state.
yes.
The money and the happiness, are not,
It
like people say, like it's not
it's not where it's at.
like, look at Elon Musk with his
Yes,
depression, and I know that depression is framed around this chemical of imbalance thing, and that he even talks about that. I mean, this okay, I'm gonna use the time on air to say this, and people can research this. The chemical imbalance theory has been disproven officially over and over again. It was made up by
yes,
pharmaceutical companies. Okay, you can look this up. There's studies and studies on this. It's being reported by the New York Times. What really causes depression are social
yes,
factors as your things like stress. And so when debt goes up, when all these different things go up, there's a correlation with depression. And so many people are suffering right now and this is why rich people suffer too. I know rich people, you go out, they'll take you out to a nice dinner, love them. And then they'll sit there and they'll be checking their cameras on their house all through the dinner. Do you know what I mean? On their security system because of more money, more problems. What causes depression?
yeah,
Worry, anxiety,
yeah.
stress. That's really what it is. And you can't buy your way out of
No.
that.
And the other no,
No.
and I think that when you have that kind of money, they it mentally messes with you. It really does. Like, you're so afraid of losing your money that it's almost a psychological, sorry for the word, but fuckery. It kind of, once you have it, you're so afraid that you're going to lose it. It at some point, money is great. It's a great tool. It can give you a lot of comfort, but beyond that, we have to stop looking at money being the sole driver of humanity on earth. And I guess that is my point. We have to figure out a
Mhm.
way to structure society where people day, all they think about is money, whether that be you're at the top of the game and you're looking at your stocks, trying to figure out how to get more in your coffers, or you're at the bottom of the game and you're trying to figure out financially what bill you're going to pay this month and what you're going to put off next month because you can't pay that bill. It's the same sort of psychological fuckery that we're dealing with every day in a way. And especially with the rise of things like AI, and I just don't hear anybody in society talking about how we are going to live as a community on this planet where we are more cooperative and less competition. And it needs to be more cooperative and less competition. And whether people like to say that that's socialism or communism. I look like somebody that wants to wait in line for bread? No, I want to live in a society that makes sense. And this society doesn't make sense the way we run it. It really doesn't. And I think psychedelics could be a great bridge for people to understand that they can think outside the box, that there is another way to be with one another that does not maybe align with what mainstream is thinking, but really is the true nature of humanity and the way we should be living.
I love that. I totally agree. Um, I think yeah, I think that one of the reasons why money is so important is because we do need it for survival and stability. But that's because we've created a
Yes.
system where everybody is kind of fighting for their own life. And that system is not, at this point, is destroying the natural world, and it's causing
Yes.
mass mental confusion and social problems. So it is really time to look at that. And like you said, I'm not advocating
No.
communism or any of these other isms, but if we look at indigenous societies do live with an understanding that there's an interdependence of one and another and the natural
Yes.
world, that everybody's dependent on everyone
Yes.
else, right? And that the common good is what's good for each individual member and the territory in which they
Yes.
live. Because if it's damaged and the water's no longer clean, there's no more fish and nobody can eat.
That's,
This kind of understanding, instead of just one person trying to get as much as possible for
that's
themselves,
exactly right.
right? So I don't know if that's not an ism. That's the way Buddhists
Yeah.
operate too. I mean, that's what a monastery is about. This is actually what, if you want to be a Christian, if you actually read, Jesus's words were
Yes.
about this, and the early Christians did sell all their possessions and live together. So this is way beyond some kind of ism
Yes.
stuff. And, you
Yeah.
know, this is actually, we're talking about actual spiritual truths and our true nature. And psychedelics can open you up to that because they peel back the kind of illusion of separation. It's one of the most powerful things they do. And so you have these kind of insights on psychedelics that, oh, when I did that, it caused that. You see the
Yeah.
chain reactions and the, butterfly
Yeah.
effects and all these kinds of
Yeah.
things. And that can open you up to a really beautiful state where feeling all alone is, um, scary. Anyway, all this like fighting for survival, you against the
Yes.
world, that's stress
Yeah.
that can lead to
Yes.
depression. And so that healing potential is in that other state of understanding.
Yep.
It's like, oh, I'm not in this alone. And then if we can create systems based on that understanding, and I think psychedelics can help us do that. That's the big picture for me.
I agree. That is the big picture, like to broaden people's perspectives and open their mind, because we are so pre-programmed to live in this "I've got mine, go get your own," to live in this over competition. We're just in such hyper competition with each other, and we are over consumers. We buy shit that we don't need on a regular basis because it gives us that hit of dopamine, that feel good, and we're addicted to anything that makes us feel good, whether it's buying that bag or whether it's taking that next drink or whatever it is. Everybody is medicating themselves with something in order to make us feel better. Food, I don't know, gambling, whatever. Name your addiction. There's so many of them out there, and we all have our own little peccadillos that like make us whatever. So I do think that psychedelics can um so enlighten us. You do have to, I certainly don't want to make people feel like you go on one ayahuasca journey and your problems are all settled. You have to do the work. There's something after a ceremony that everyone speaks of. It's called integration. Integrating is when you have a ceremony and then post ceremony, you really have to dive into the emotional effects that that ceremony had on you, work through them, understand them, and it allows you to kind of maintain a little level of that higher consciousness that you had during your journey. And then when you do your next journey, you're even that much more prepared to go in and sit with Mother Aya and let her teach you, let her heal you, because that is what they're here to do. They're spiritually wise plants that can teach you, that can heal you, but you have to open your heart and you have to listen.
I love that. Yeah, that they're often called teacher plant.
Yes.
Um, right. And that's because from my perspective, um, yeah, they don't necessarily do the work for you. Like a good teacher, they give you some guidance and then it's still up to you. They send you home with that homework. You know, you can see in an ayahuasca session, oh, when I do that, I'm hurting myself and hurting other people. But the change of behavior is still up to
Yes.
you. You just see it clearly. You've had a teacher kind of show it to you. And sometimes that showing can be painful, can be like, whoa. And if you don't change it and you just come back thinking if you just keep drinking ayahuasca, it's going to fix you, that can even become more painful. I know people are like, I had to stop drinking ayahuasca because it was getting crazier and crazier. And I was like, well, were you
That's right.
integrating, like you said, the lesson? Because if you don't, you're not going to go
That's
anywhere.
right. It's work.
You're
It
not.
is work. It's a
It's work.
spiritual work on your own, raising your vibration, getting in touch with who you really are, which is we are all connected. We are all one. We are all energy, vibration, frequency, beings of light, whatever. You're tapping into that, lifting the veil a little bit when you're in a Aya journey and she's communing with you,
Mhm.
and it's a sacred experience in my opinion. It's sacred. And that's why I worry about the over commercialization, people going into the Amazon, especially Americans. We don't have a great track record of going into other areas of the world and them becoming better. They ultimately end up becoming more corrupt, more polluted, more of what we don't want in the world. So, especially when I think of the pharmaceutical industry that would love nothing more if they could. Now, to my knowledge, I don't believe they can patent plants because they belong to nature, and I believe but if they could patent these things and make billions of dollars, they will, and they might still figure out a way to do that. I know that they're they're looking at concoctions that are like slightly variables of psilocybin, slightly variables of some things, and starting to do research and testing to see if they could bring that to market. And I just don't have a lot of faith in corporations overseeing this type of medicine. I just don't. But we'll see how that goes.
Nor do
We'll see how that
I.
goes.
Nor do I.
I just think pharmaceuticals are here to make a gazillion dollars a year, whatever they're making. And I don't think they're here to help us, to cure us. I think they're here to mask symptoms and to make sure that we have to take something for a long period of time because anybody who gets cured is not making them any money. That's my take on that.
I love it. So, Chrissy, I think like
Yeah.
combo is it cleanses your
Yes.
body. A lot of these plant medicines also cleanse your body. And that is one way they can help people to heal physically. But even on the much larger level, a lot of these all these diseases you mentioned are are connected to high levels of contamination in almost everything that we eat. I'm an environmental journalist. The food system is one of my favorite topics, and the food system exists the way it does only because a small number of people are making a lot of money
That's
on
right.
it. It is, we do not have a food system that is created for the health of people or for the health of the planet. And it's just another example of where we all lose under the current system. I read a study the other day that the average American consumes 2 credit card sizes, quantities of plastic a year. 2 credit, each one of us. So right, how plant, and so that's making us sick, obviously. Like all that plastic, the plastic particles in our body have been linked to everything from hormonal disruption to causing cancer. You don't want to be eating plastic. Nobody does. And we all are. So at a different level, so what psychedelics can help us see something which should actually be obvious, which is that we are not separate from this. This, all of these diseases, this rise in all these things is linked to the fact that we're contaminating
Yep.
everything. So psychedelics can help us to see that and change the system So, I mean, nobody escapes the pollutants in the air. Nobody really escapes this. We are all living in the same house
Yeah.
here. You know, you can be a billionaire. You're still breathing the air. You can, you know, you're still like eating out. I mean, unless you really, I guess you could escape to an ultra pure bubble on the moon and be the ultimate Grinch away from all the who's. But guess what? How boring. Do you know? And how like pitiful would that be?
Truly.
Let's get this, we should get this together and we can do this so much better is really what we need to do, you know?
I am hopeful. I know that there is so much division out there now. I think that psychedelics could bring down that wall of division and allow people to see themselves for who we are rather than what our belief system is. It seems if you have a different belief system than somebody else these days, you are the enemy, you are not like me, you are
Yeah.
different, you are other. We other people to death, whether they be people of different religions, people of different countries, people of different color. We other people to death. We don't understand that we truly are all connected and we are
Mm.
just fellow travelers to the grave. And until we, I feel also, we have become so much more petty. Social media has just made us more negative, petty, and, and I don't think it's as much as they thought it would bring us more connectivity. We have never been more disconnected, ever. And, I'm hopeful. I think that psychedelics could play a role in truly transforming who we are. And all I can say is that I hope people lose their fear, lose their prior biases of something that's called a psychedelic. It's not there to necessarily for people to trip on or to have some sort of psychological break. They're much more there to heal you, to open your heart, to open your mind, if done with the correct facilitator in the correct setting, with a shaman, with somebody who's knowledgeable with these plants that can actually lead you through it and get you on the other side and do a full integration. And it could really change the world, I think.
Absolutely. I think so too. It gives me a lot of
It
hope. And that's what this book, there's 22 different voices in this book, but that's the running theme. That's what we ask each one of them to address. Like that's a subtitle, right? The role of
yes.
psychedelics in global transformation. How is this, what's happening, this psychedelic renaissance going to change the
Yeah.
world? And, ultimately, it's because they're conscious change agents, I think is what it comes down to. And we have to be willing to make that change. But if we are, they're powerful
Yeah.
tools, very powerful
I
tools.
agree. And I think it's a shame that they were put on schedule one drug uh illegal. I mean, these are plants that have been growing out of the ground since the dawn of time. And to make them illegal and take that away from humanity when really it could be something that obviously you've been down in the Amazon and you've been with these shamans and these tribes. They have such a fundamental different culture and way of thinking about the world, about what we are, about nature. They understand we are a part of nature. We've done nothing but try and separate ourselves from nature, try to feel like we're above nature, to tame nature, to think that nature is something that is not here for our healing. We are nature. We need nature, and I think that people think that nature is secondary in their lives, in their world, in everything, and we have damaged it beyond. But the first thing that we need to start understanding is that we are a part of nature and we need to start acting like it, respecting it, bringing it back, cleaning it up. And psychedelics, I think, could be a great bridge also in that regard, is that we need to start loving Mother Nature again. She is here for us.
Absolutely. I love that. And I think that's part of uh, the
Yeah.
therapeutic in knowing that, this is not a world that we have to fight against to survive. This is a world that provides
Yes.
for us. and we can relax into that,
Yes.
and indigenous people very much understand that in a respectful
Yeah.
way. It's very obvious when you live that close to nature. It's less obvious for us because we live in such a technified society where food seems to come from the corporations and the
Yes.
supermarket. And it does in a sense, but it doesn't really. It still grows on a tree. People are always like, money doesn't grow on a tree. I'm like, you're right, but guess what? Food does. You know what I
Yep.
mean? Food
Food
does. Okay.
does. There's
It
just
does.
we're not going to solve all the world's problems today in this podcast, but I will say we've addressed some of the huge um, conundrums that really, if we don't start talking about this more, one of the reasons why I'm doing this podcast is I want to start talking about this within our culture, within the ether. I feel like we need less talk about things that don't matter, like what somebody's wearing or what fancy whatever, and more conversations that actually matter, that can actually transform people's lives and help them and guide them. And I just want more of conversations like this out in the world. And I'm so very honored and grateful and happy that you came on the show today to talk about this, because it is such an important topic that not a lot of people are knowledgeable of. So I think spreading the word, spreading the love is the name of the game. And I hope you tell as many people about this book and get it out there so people can start understanding the power that these plants have and how they could truly transform everything in your life.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Christy. Thanks for having me on. Excellent. I can't believe an hour went by
I
so
know it
fast.
did go by fast.
Excellent conversation. Yeah, I think we could go on for hours, but
I mean,
because it's a multifaceted thing, but it's one thing too. And it is very important. Thank you for bringing this conversation to the
It
forefront.
it
Thank you.
is. The thing is that psychedelics could touch so many different things. One of the things we didn't talk about, which we might as well, if you have time, we can bring it up, is one of the interesting
Okay.
perspectives in the book was using psychedelics in prisons. And when they talked in the book about using plant medicine or psychedelics in prison to kind of break people out of that criminal behavior, I thought that was an interesting idea. What what do you think
Sure.
about that type of use for psychedelics? That's interesting.
Well, yeah, that chapter is one of my favorites. It's Peter Hendricks, who is a researcher who shows that psychedelic treatment to violent offenders, I
Yeah.
think, resulted in less recidivism. So they were less likely to do it again and come back to prison. He just, gives you the numbers. And I think it's great to be able to show people these numbers and say, look, this is data and it's not
Yeah.
lying. Like, this is for real. This is what psychedelics can do. But I also think it's important, and you kind of touched on it. It's also important to know that poverty causes
Yeah.
crime, right? We're not going to just come up with a pill that's going to stop people from committing crime. Poverty. I grew up in a poor neighborhood. I grew up in Oakland, California, in a poverty-stricken area, and crime was rampant because people need things and they don't have the money for them. And then what happens is you get into a cycle. You become incarcerated. A lot of times you're treated very poorly in prison. There's psychological issues that accumulate, and there becomes a cycle of behavior and identity and your role in society as a criminal. Psychedelic can help break through that, but without alleviating some of these structural causes of poverty. I'm still that big systems
Yeah.
thinker, although that's one of my favorite chapters. I just want to make it clear that I don't think we could just go dose everybody in prison and solve the problem. If they have to come back to these, you basically artificially scarce landscapes where there's nothing there. There's no food. Like just talking about trees. There's no food growing. There's nothing to do. There's only liquor
Yeah.
stores, and there's only drugs to sell, and there's only crime to commit. The prisons are always going to be full, no matter how.
Um, I would like to see prisons actually be a place where it doesn't treat you like an animal, because when you treat people like animals, you're going to create animals. And
Absolutely.
part of our prison system is not only is it there just as a profit thing, they get lots of free labor from the prisoners in there, number one, which I'm on the fence about. And number two, it's not there to really retrain you. Anybody that goes to prison is probably coming out with no job opportunities, worse feeling about themselves, worse mentally than they were prior to them going in. Like, that's a whole nother system that I feel like needs to be completely rethought, revamped. It should be a much more of a system where we're trying to actually change people's minds and behaviors along with the structural system, which is a whole nother problem. It's overwhelming.
And I think that may be, as bad as that is, that may also be the good news, because maybe it's like coming to that
Yeah.
place where we know that it can no longer
Sustain.
go
Yeah.
on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it really have. We push these things to the breaking point. We've been pushing them to the breaking point for a while, and now they're
Yeah.
breaking. They're breaking down around
Yeah.
us. Um, I hear in San Francisco, you can see, I'm sure in LA as well, addiction and homelessness and all kinds of things are out of
Yeah.
control. And, the prison system, we've designed this prison system. We have the largest prison system in the world, right? Not just by population, because we're a big country, but even by rate, like according, it's like, and we spend in California, I was reading this the other day, $120,000 per inmate in the California state system. Now, and like you said, are we actually doing anything for that person? Are we just spending all this money to make sure that that they're being punished as much as possible, which just hurts an already hurt person
That's right.
more, right? And it just creates more problems for that person and for society. Now, yes, I think prisons should be transformed, but I also think that we could be spending that money in smarter ways to prevent people from coming to prison in the first place. I mean, $120,000 could be like a universal basic, I'm going to introduce this one, a universal basic
Yeah.
income for like 4 or 5 or 8 people or whatever. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? And not let people get to that level where they feel that desperate in the first place.
I agree. We have chewed on a lot of different topics during this podcast for sure. The problems are never ending, but I think that starting a discussion around these things, having an intelligent discussion that is not based in ideology, but is based in logic and common sense and something that is for the greater good of all with good intentions behind it. You need people to have conversations that ultimately aren't in it for themselves and are in it for the greater good. If you don't have that intention, I don't know how we're going to get people on board to make these types of leaps in our society that we're going to have to make. I'm hoping for the best. I'm holding on. I'm going to do my part. I'm going to have these conversations and hopefully it'll start opening people's minds and allowing them to see things with a different perspective and change accordingly. That's all you can do. You can just put your own intention out there and hope it influences someone for the good.
That's exactly it, Christine. That's what you're doing with this podcast, is you're using this to have these conversations. That's what I do as a writer. And I think we just all need to keep doing it. And these conversations need to get bigger and
They do.
bigger. And they are. And that's the part that I see growing. And I see a lot of beautiful things happening at the same time. I just want to thank you so much for having me on this show and exploring all this with me. And I hope listeners continue to talk about these kinds of things amongst themselves. And do you know what? Think about using psychedelics as a
Yeah.
tool, because they are mind expanding consciousness change agents. Research who you're doing them with. Nature is always a
Yes.
good place to do them.
Yes. I mean, I can't imagine doing it anywhere else. I mean, it really is the bubble that you want to put yourself in is under a night sky or in a jungle or somewhere out there where you can hear the nature. It's alive. It has its own energy, its own consciousness, and it will take you on the journey. You need that, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's what I want to leave with it. people always ask me where they should get started with some of these things like ayahuasca or iboga or
Yeah.
even like the huachu, the San Pedro or peyote. You probably do want a very skilled
Yes.
facilitator. But something like psilocybin, if you're already on a spiritual path and you have a group of spiritually minded friends, and like you said, and you want to go camp out around a fire and do some music and be in a safe environment with people you know and love and trust and talk about things like we just talked about good things and about how to change the world. Psilocybin mushrooms are really, I want to say the word recommend because I can't recommend anything, but they're a wonderful friend. They can
There
be.
is no doubt about that. I can attest to it. Also, a lot of people microdose psilocybin mushrooms,
That's right.
because it does give you, it'll lift that depression. It'll give you a boost. And if you take them with the right intention, you can really get some healing. You can get some journeys. You can have some really incredible moments. You just always have to do it with the best intention and with in a safe environment, preferably outdoors.
Absolutely. And like you just said, you can start really small
Yes.
too. You can
Microdose.
microdose and see how you feel.
Yeah.
And you can just bump it up until you get a little bit of an effect.
Yeah.
You don't have to just jump in and you don't have to go for ego death
No.
on your first
No.
thing. No, you can just go for like
Yeah.
exploration, you know?
You don't wanna take a hero dose right out the gate, you don't wanna go there and meet your maker on day 1 with these with these things. Um,
I totally
you know,
agree.
Ocean, I am going to put the link to your book in the show notes. Um, it is Infinite Perception, the role of psychedelics in global transformation. It has a lot of good information out there. It'll drop that mystery behind psychedelics, give you a lot more information from everyone from science and research to shamanism. It's very informative, highly recommendable. I will put the links to OBooks as well as Amazon in the shows. Is there any sort of, do you want me to put any kind of social media there for you? Do you want people to follow you? Do you want to shout that out at all or?
Sure. No, I'm on yeah, I'm not I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Ocean
Okay.
Malandra. You can follow me. I do try to post. I try to keep people posted when I have a new article up or
Yeah.
whatever. So yeah, follow me. I'm going back to South America in a couple of weeks. I'm going to the COP16, which is the United Nations Biodiversity Conference, and I will be joining a delegation of spiritual leaders from the Colombian Amazon who are going to doing a panel there, and we're going to have there's going to be 150 different nations present. United States is not signed on to this
Mm,
treaty for biodiversity. And this there's a lot of talk about integrating biodiversity in agricultural systems. Like we're working on solutions for a lot of these problems. United States needs to get on board.
yep.
I just want to say that officially. But yeah, so I'll be posting about that. Follow me if you want to see what we're doing. We're bringing the medicine
Well,
to the United Nations this October.
keep doing what you're doing, Ocean. Keep being a soldier for good. And I really appreciate you taking the time to come on this show and telling me all about it. I loved our discussion. And anytime you want to come back and promote another book or promote anything, you are welcome. And with that, gang, we're going to go ahead and leave it there. That is a wrap on this episode of Fate from Atheism to Enlightenment. And I will see you all next week. Journey well, everyone. Bye. And that is a wrap on Ocean Malandra's and his book called Infinite Perception, The Role of Psychedelics in Global Transformation. That was a lot. We covered a lot of ground. I really loved our conversation. I think that psychedelics is something that we should try and mainstream a little bit more, only because of the massive amount of mental unwellness that we see in today's society. It's just overwhelming. Everybody has some sort of depression, bipolar, PTSD. It is rampant. It's everywhere. We are not a mentally well society in general. I do have huge reservations about mainstreaming this as far as it goes commercially because I'm very concerned about the environment. The jungles are already being overly resourced, cut down, and I definitely don't want to contribute to that. I feel that our rainforests are the lungs of the world. To be honest, they truly are. And we're already damaging our environment to the point where Mother Nature is on the brink, guys. We see it everywhere. We see the pollutants in the water, the air, our food, the earth. There really isn't anything that has not been touched by man and polluted and destroyed. And it makes me really hesitant to go in there and start manufacturing or making these types of plant medicines for everyone. I don't know what the solve is here. I really don't. I do know that they could be of great benefit to so many people if they have the right person helping them, leading them through it, the process, integrating. I can't stress enough how important the post ceremony of integration is. It can be truly transformative, truly open your mind, truly change your perspective when most people can't change their mind about anything these days. We are dug in to our beliefs, we're dug in to our own perspectives, and it takes moving a mountain to get anyone to change their beliefs, their minds, or anything. And that's the power of plant medicine. They have that kind of ability to change you overnight and to make you understand that, I'll keep saying it, that there's more going on in our reality, that there is more than what we think happening, and we are stronger and more capable and more powerful beings than what we are being told. So, I highly recommend you go and investigate that if it resonates with you. If it doesn't resonate with you, it's not something that's calling you. A lot of people in the spiritual community do say things like, you don't go to Aya, Aya will call you. You know, you will get a calling, an inner knowing, a pull to go do something like this. Maybe it is a situation where it's not meant for everyone, and I used Aya just because I have a familiarity with that, but there is peyote, iboga, there's all kinds of different plant medicines out there that, can give you a very similar effect and help your mental well-being, help your physical healing. you know, there's a lot to be said for the healing nature of these plants. One of the tribal leaders in the book says something of this nature. I believe his name was Matilda Gomez Silvado says, ayahuasca can't cure, only raising your consciousness can cure. And I believe that to be very much the truth of the matter is that these plants can open your mind and allow you to see that you should be living in love, that you should be letting go of lower vibrational feelings such as hate, um, unworthiness, um, things of that nature. Excuse me. So it's a journey. It is doing the work to improve yourself not only mentally and physically. It is having the right facilitator. It is integration, 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 and it is maybe having a little bit of a calling to do this in the first place. And if you are thinking about doing anything like this, the first thing I would do is a lot of research and do it within a ceremonial or a church setting, and not in the United States. I mean, a lot of this stuff is illegal in the United States, and you could get in trouble for doing this. I did not do it here. So It's a path. It's a path to healing. I think that it is going to become more and more accepted. And I think it's going to become more and more part of mainstream. I think that ball is already been set in motion. I think there's lots of little places that are looking into psilocybin and getting that to market. I think that is already happening in the works. And I'm sure that that will benefit a lot of people. There is just no doubt that these plants can help you. They can. They are here to help and heal us. That is their purpose, I believe, to give us wisdom, to heal us, to allow us, see ourselves for who we really are, to expand our minds, our consciousness. That is, there are great teachers. We don't have that in our culture. And, this is a very indigenous, South American tribal culture. I wouldn't say Americans, I would say European white culture. When we came in, we kind of thought these people were uncivilized and barbaric and even even in America where we did with the Indians, the Native American Indians, where we felt they were uncivilized when it was quite the opposite. We were the uncivilized and the barbaric ones. They were living here for hundreds of thousands of years within nature, completely communally, in a way that was not destructive. There was no homelessness, there was nobody on drugs, and there was nobody, committing crimes. Well, I wouldn't go that far, but you know what I'm saying. It was a much more civilized society than what white men were doing to other people, to the environment, to each other. It's just the way it was. We just got painted a level of history that highlighted some things that maybe weren't exactly the truth. Go figure. Anyways, guys, like I said, if you are interested in doing anything like this, do some research and make sure you sit with the right people that have the right intentions and that are going to be your guide. It's important. And I'm certainly not giving anybody medical advice. I'm not telling anybody to go do this. Not everybody is meant to take psychedelics. If you should, that is why I'm telling you to do some research because not everybody should take these plant medicines. If you have some sort of rare mental condition, um, physical condition, you got to be your own best advocate and do what is best for your own interests and what you're looking to achieve. I can't give you that information. You have to go out and do your own research, talk to people, and buy the book. Tons of great information in there. It'll really open your mind to psychedelics, to the power of psychedelics, to how they can transform people. There's all types of examples. And a lot of the book talks, from anthropologists to a scientist to activists to tribal leaders. Many, many, many of them say the same thing about how we need to start protecting our environment, nature, that we are one with nature, that we are on the precipice of losing so much of our own beauty, nature in this world because we are over commercialized, over consuming, and over polluting this planet for the almighty economy. And I understand we all need money and it's a tool, but there's got to be a better system than what we have currently thought of that is going to allow for us to live sustainably within nature, a part of nature. And that really is going to take a lot of changing hearts and minds. That's just the way we're going to get there. And I'm hoping this conversation started that journey with some of you, changing your hearts and minds. That's the goal. Um, anyways, y'all, if you're liking this podcast and you think I've got something to say, please tell a friend, share it, subscribe, do something to endeavor me to be able to reach as many people as possible. That is the goal. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, I am at F.A.T.E. podcast. Don't really have any other Instagram or any other social medias of right now. Um, I'm hoping to change that in the near future, but do me a favor, give me a like, share it, tell a friend, and I'd love to bring as many with you on this journey as I possibly can. So, with that, y'all, we'll put the links in the show notes to the book. Pick it up if it interests you. And if you have any kind of feedback you want to leave me, go ahead and DM me on Instagram and I will try and get back to you. And we will see you next week on Fate, from Atheism to Enlightenment. Journey well, everyone. And welcome to your fate. See you.